Welcome to episode 26. You are Trapped in History with me, your host, Robbie Malcomson. Today's episode is entitled The End of the Reformation. And by that I mean the end of the Protestant and Catholic Counter-Reformations. In today's episode, we will explore the concluding phases of the Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation. We'll delve into the wars of religion, including the Dutch Revolts, the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, and the War of the Three Henries, and examine the 30 Years' War from its beginning, middle, and to the end. Finally, we will discuss the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, its significance, and its impact on the future balance of power in Europe. The quote of the week is something that connects more to Unit 3, but I think it's a great way of blending Unit 2 and 3 together, so that way it makes more sense for students. For us, since we're about to go on a 2-week fall break after September ends. So the quote of the week comes from Cardinal Richelieu. Cardinal Richelieu was the chief minister to King Louis XIII of France from 1624 to 1642, and his main goal was to consolidate state power in France in order to establish a future absolute monarchy. He states in this quote, "Peace is not made at the council tables or by treaties, but in the hearts of men." So you see Cardinal Richelieu, a key figure in the French state during the later stages of the wars of religion and the 30 Years' War, highlights the idea that true peace extends beyond just diplomatic agreements. His quote reflects the deep-seated religious and political tensions that could not be easily resolved by treaties alone, setting the stage for the understanding the complexities behind the Peace of Westphalia, which concluded the 30 Years' War. Our document of the week, or source of the week, comes from the end of the unit, and that would be the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. Whenever, as you know if you teach this course, that this is where that first timeline era ends in the first and second units in 1648. And you'll notice as you go through teaching this class that whenever dates begin or dates end, it's usually whenever a massive conflict is either beginning or ending as well. So kind of pay attention to that pattern. But the fragment from the Peace of Westphalia I want to highlight states, "And this peace and amity shall be observed and cultivated with such a sincerity and zeal on both sides that each party shall endeavor to procure the benefit, honor, and advantage of the other." Now, an overview of this document to help with the context is that the Peace of Westphalia comprised a series of treaties together that fully ended the 30 Years' War within the Holy Roman Empire, and as well the 80 Years' War between Spain and the Dutch Republic, which could also sometimes be referred to as the Dutch Revolts. The treaties marked a turning point in European history, establishing the principles of state sovereignty and non-intervention. They recognized the independence of the Dutch Republic and Switzerland and laid the groundwork for the future modern nation-state system. This document, this very important document, is significant because it ended decades of religious and territorial conflict, redrew political boundaries, and set a precedent for future international diplomacy by prioritizing state sovereignty and religious tolerance. So we put this up there. I know in the last episode I discussed the Act of Supremacy, which was from Henry VIII. That was a massive document for right there in the middle of the unit. I think that this is a perfect document to really end on. And as you're going into Unit 3, you can start to ask some questions that then connect to these future absolutism or absolute monarchies, and then eventually places breaking away into constitutionalism like the Dutch Republic, and eventually England in the Glorious Revolution of 1688 and 1689. Now let's move on to our main section today, and that is breaking down some of these parts of the wars of religion and then eventually ending with the 30 Years' War. So today is more of a focus on war, and that was more of my focus in college was military history, although I've really grown to love social history. But I think it's great to really focus in on these two major phases of conflict. And the wars of religion can be confusing because there's quite a few conflicts that make this up. So I'm only going to hyper focus on a few of them that make up the bulk of that. But you can even go even deeper into this as well. So let's start with the Dutch Revolts. So keep in mind for context, up to this point, after the first two episodes that we've recorded for Unit 2 with the Reformation, we obviously see a tremendous amount of religious conflict and tension boiling up within the Holy Roman Empire and within Europe. And we know that we have names like Luther and John Calvin, Luther in the German states, Calvin in France, Zwingli in Switzerland, Henry VIII up in England as well with that Reformation. And then this is all culminating to some major conflicts that we're getting into today. So the Dutch Revolts that start in 1568, ultimately ending whenever the 30 Years' War ends in 1648, this is also known as the 80 Years' War against Spain. And it was a conflict in which the Dutch provinces fought for independence from the famous Spanish Habsburgs. It began as a religious struggle, like the many things we've seen in this unit, against the Catholic repression led by the Duke of Alba, and evolved into a broader fight for political autonomy. So this is where we see it's not just religion on its own that's causing these issues. There's also political reasons. There's social reasons. You have to remember these things are complex and they're nuanced. So it's good to really take a deep dive into these. And remember, I did a deep dive on the wars of religion in episode number 9, if you get a chance to go back and listen to that. So a great historical reasoning skill from AP to apply here is causation. So you can think of it as the revolt was driven by a combination of religious persecution, political oppression, and economic grievances leading to the eventual independence of the Dutch Republic. So the Dutch Republic being predominantly Protestant now, so you see the ideas of Luther, Zwingli, Calvin really blending into that area as well as in Henry's effect up in England. And of course the Spanish Habsburgs being strongly Catholic are not going to take kindly to that transition. And they're going to try to wrap more control on that. So it makes sense that the Dutch are fighting so hard to get autonomy, to get independence, so they can thrive going forward. And then we're going to be entering an era very soon where we refer to it as the Dutch Golden Age. And it pretty much is right here as well, but into the 1600s too. Because don't forget, they're also going around and exploring as well here soon. So another event that we want to connect to in the Wars of Religion is famously the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre. There's also a great painting that you can find of this. This is one of those massive events that happens in one day, but it triggers even more attention, and eventually it bleeds into a conflict known as the War of the Three Henrys as well. So in 1572, on August 23rd, a mass killing of French Huguenots, these are Protestants in France influenced by Calvin, and a mass killing takes place in Paris, the capital of France, and it was instigated by the Catholic royal family, and it was triggered by rising tensions following a marriage meant to foster peace between Catholics and Protestants. It marked actually one of the bloodiest episodes of the French Wars of Religion and damaged the reputation of the Queen Catherine de' Medici, who had actually planned the attack, and then the Catholic nobles carried out that attack. And basically, this isn't an example of genocide. This is a systematic attempt at trying to wipe out the Protestant Huguenots. And as we've seen this unit, this isn't just going to make the problem go away. It only exacerbates the problem. And this is a great moment to apply the historical reasoning skill contextualization. So think about this massacre illustrates the depth and complexity of religious hatred and fear in France, and the fragile nature of peace efforts during this period. So after the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre, later on we get to, in 1587 and 89, we get to the War of the Three Henrys, a very unusual name for probably one of the most unusual names of wars that we cover in AP Euro through the whole year. And this is a civil war. We're still in France here. And this is fought between King Henry III of France, Henry Navarre, which was actually a Huguenot Protestant leader, and Henry the Duke of Guise, who is part of the Catholic League. It resulted in ultimately the assassination of Henry III of France and Henry of Guise, leaving only Henry of Navarre to claim the French throne, and he changes his title and name to Henry IV. Eventually, he will even convert from Protestantism to Catholicism in order to further unify France amongst this extremely bloody conflict. And as they've been going through this, 15 to 20 year period of a lot of violence over religion. And other than converting to Catholicism, which is a major factor that he also does another major document within the unit, and that is a document called the Edict of Nantes. And the Edict of Nantes ends the War of the Three Henries. It also provides religious toleration for Protestant Huguenots that are in northern France. So, finally bringing an end to this particular conflict. But even a conflict like this ending, it's not going to prevent something later in the Holy Roman Empire, like the 30 Years' War. So, this is another great chance for historical reasoning skills such as continuity and change. So how does something stay similar over a scale of time? How does something differ over a scale of time? And think of it in terms of the War of the Three Henries underscores the shifting allegiances and complex interplay of religion and politics, culminating in the Edict of Nantes in 1598, which granted limited rights to the French Protestants. So that concludes the quick little overview of the wars of religion. If you want to take another deeper dive into that, go to episode 9. If I'm not actually able to help you enough, then by all means go to someone like Heimler or Emily Poole or other people that you might be able to get a lot more help in. Because I know everybody's voice is different, and some people's voices and the way they teach resonate with others differently. And I completely understand that. I'm just now starting this podcast. And again, like I said last episode, I'm going to do more of skimming the top and getting the general overview this year as I'm teaching it. And then throughout the next year, I want to take some more spotlighting, deep dive episodes and having deeper discussions, maybe inviting a lot of our guests back on again to have roundtable discussions, truly picking apart and tearing off those layers of all these topics that we're covering. So let's transition to the last major topic of the night, and that is the 30 Years' War. And the 30 Years' War begins in 1618. It was sparked by something called the Defenestration of Prague, a very unusual name and quite difficult for teenagers to also wrap their heads around as well. And basically in 1618, this phase involved local conflicts in Bohemia, a German state, as Protestant nobles, these Protestant landowners, resisted the Catholic Habsburg monarchy. The war quickly expanded due to religious tensions and, as usual, another continuity, political ambitions as well across Europe. So we see constantly through this whole unit is politics and religious tensions meshing together. And this might be another one of those reasons that people like Thomas More speak out so critically against the combination of church and state. And maybe another reason why in America, the foundation of our country, we try to apply the philosophy of separation of church and state. So a historical causation or skill for this would be causation. Think of the complex web of alliances that's going on in the Holy Roman Empire, different religious affiliations and territorial ambitions, which is turning the conflict into a much wider war as we go forward here. And you're going to get lots of different countries getting meshed into this. So you're even getting Denmark and Sweden coming down into the Holy Roman Empire and getting heavily involved in the war as well, which I think this is a good time to transition to the middle of the 30 Years' War. So the middle of the war saw the entry of Denmark and Sweden into the conflict, led by King Christian IV and King Gustavus Adolphus. And I try to hit on Gustavus Adolphus quite a bit in class. And respectively, they both sought to support Protestant causes while expanding their own influence. So it's not, hey, we're coming down here to help you, all you Protestants, just out of goodwill. Obviously, like any phase in human history, there's other motives here too. There's other intentions going on to expand their own influence into these territories. Because if your neighbors are weaker, why would you not expand your influence in those areas? And that's probably what they're thinking. And the war increasingly took on a more political and dynastic character as well. And Gustavus Adolphus uses a lot of modern kind of military strategies, and he sets new precedents in a style that wars will be fought into the future. And the way that he uses his military is very unique and transcendental at that time. Now, this is a great chance to use the historical skill of comparison to apply to this. And think of the middle phase of the 30 Years' War and how it demonstrates the shift from a primarily religious conflict up to this point with the defenestration of Prague and people fighting each other on those states and hiring even mercenaries to be involved into it. But then it transitions into one that is shaped by state interest and political strategy. To conclude the 30 Years' War, let's look at the involvement of France here. So in France, you have Cardinal Richelieu leading this because Louis XIII is still too young to be able to lead on his own, and Cardinal Richelieu is leading that first for him and helping to consolidate power on his own. He is going to enter the war as well on the Protestant side against the Habsburgs. This is very strange, a Catholic cardinal, entering the war, representing France on the Protestant side. What an unusual turn of events to go against the Habsburgs. And the Habsburgs, again, this family that has a significant influence over the Holy Roman Empire within Spain. So despite being Catholic, this reveals the political motivations that dominated the later stages of the 30 Years' War. So ultimately, the 30 Years' War concludes with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648, and it finally ended the war, marking a new era in European politics. And this also, you can apply continuity and change with this again, because the conclusion of the war signifies this critical transformation in European diplomatic relations with a move toward more secular, non-religious state interest over religious unity. And this is why Europe will never be the same after this war is over. And you have to go back a little bit to some things that I barely mentioned on the previous two episodes, because earlier on, Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire tried to appease some of these religious tensions in the German states and the Holy Roman Empire by signing the Peace of Augsburg, which allowed princes to choose the religion of their subjects, to give at least some kind of baby step towards some type of religious toleration. Well, then the next Habsburg ruler after him, after Charles V, which I believe is Ferdinand II, I might have to double check that. So if I'm wrong, I'll correct that on the next episode. Well, one of his first things is to do is I'm going to get rid of the Peace of Augsburg, and I'm going to try to unify this whole entire empire under Catholicism again, also further sparking the 30 Years' War and increasing this. So again, many reasons. It's complex on there. And I will be talking about this in class as well, too, because I haven't even started teaching the Reformation in class until Monday as we're going forward. So let's take a little deeper dive into the document here, the one that ends the war. And we can look at the Peace of Westphalia and why it's significant. So the Peace of Westphalia, it ends this war. It also ends the 80 Years' War between the Dutch Republic and Spain and establishes new principles of national sovereignty, religious tolerance, and a new balance of power in Europe. So the rest of the school year, you're not going to see nearly as much political influence from the Catholic Church anymore. And you're going to see a rise of absolute monarchs, and some are going to be enlightened monarchs later, and that will make more sense when we get to the topics of Unit 4. But this is going to significantly change the political landscape of Europe. And the significance of this treaty not only redrew the map of Europe physically, but it also laid the foundation for the modern international order with an emphasis on state sovereignty and legal equality. And you need to understand that the Peace of Westphalia is crucial for recognizing its role in ending religious wars in Europe and ushering in this new era of political thought and diplomacy. So the Peace of Westphalia truly ends any other major conflicts in Europe going forward over religion. So let's end this episode today, much shorter than the previous two, with two thought-provoking philosophical questions. I will do one more episode about the Reformation, but purely just as a bridge, as a transition to how the Renaissance and exploration and the Reformation together, how does that all blend in and lead into absolutism and constitutional governments. So we'll do another 20 or 30 minute episode connecting, because as we talked before, we want to maintain that continuity and change throughout the whole year and constantly comparing things back and forth. You have to understand this topic that AP European history, I believe, needs to be taught like a narrative arc, a narrative story. And even though these things layer on each other in a complex manner, I think if we spend at least one episode connecting different topics together, it's going to make a lot more sense for the listeners, or at least my intention is to help that. So let's do these two philosophy questions to leave you with as a listener to further ponder the gravity of these two conflicts, the gravity of a treaty like the Peace of Westphalia. So question number one, if the Peace of Westphalia had not prioritized state sovereignty and religious tolerance, how might the concept of nation-state and the modern international relations look different today? And for reflection, consider how these principles influence our current political systems and diplomatic practices. Ask yourself, what alternative paths could history have taken without these developments? And I think as you discuss these and you think about them, it starts to become more obvious why we study these type of events, why we focus on these, because you have to narrow them down to somewhere, and they're not perfect, but they are transcendental moments that are going to affect the history of the world going forward. Question number two, the last one of the day, was the Peace of Westphalia primarily a victory for secular politics over religious authority, or did it simply reflect a new way for religious conflicts to manifest? Because if any of you know, we get into like that Bosnian genocide later on in the 90s, that's also fueled by religious and social unrest differently too. So do religious conflicts just look differently in the future? So they're still there. They just may not be in the form of this traditional warfare that we have seen in this unit. And think for reflection for this question, think about the intersection and relation of religion and politics in today's world. And ask yourself, are the lessons from the Peace of Westphalia still relevant in navigating modern conflicts, balancing people's religious desire and importance along with their political desires as well? So I appreciate you all joining me for this other unit. I hope you enjoyed the 3 episodes that are over the Reformation. And again, I'll do one more this weekend, or soon at least, connecting it to the next unit. And then we're going to be focusing on some interviews for a while, and then some other topics like strategy. So around the second week of October or so, I'll pick back up on the content again as well. So without further ado, I hope you all have a wonderful week as always, and be contagious.